The princess makes new friends. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. She had been living alone, just fine for a very long time, until the day she noticed food and small items were disappearing from her house. The thefts went on and on until the day her last cake, which had been made with the last of her eggs, the last of her fruit, the last of her nuts, and the last of her flour. Well, that last cake was stolen too. And all she found at the scene of the crime were two trails of tiny feet in the spilled flour, leading to a hidden hatch in the floorboards. The princess did not try to open the hatch, nor did she try to break it. She was too tired and too hungry. All she could do was cry in silence, alone in the big wooden house, hidden in the ancient and deep forest. She cried for a long time until evening arrived, and then she cried some more. Suddenly, a tiny voice came from under the house. "What is that noise you make?" it asked. We do not like it. Not one bit. I'm crying because you two are mean to me, whoever you are. You stole the food I had, and I will starve before the end of this long and cold winter. The hatch opened just a peep, revealing two frowning faces peering out from the darkness of their hideout. "But we are hungry too," said the second creature. "We have been hiding in this cave for a long time, and now the winter is upon us, and we need food." The princess dried her eyes and smiled at the two goblins. "If we were friends, we could share the cake you stole from me." The two thieves spat and smirked. "A friend? What is that?" The princess frowned, for she realized that the two tiny thieves were as lonely as she was. "A friend is someone you love and care for, someone you would never hurt. We never hurt each other, and we care for each other," said the goblins at the same time. "Does that mean we are friends?" "Yes, that's exactly it. And if we were friends, you would not hurt us?" "Of course not. Friends trust each other." The goblins shook their little heads. "We trust no one, for no one trusts us." Their words made the princess cry again, for now she understood that the two creatures were not only as lonely as she was here in the big wooden house, but they had been lonely since they were born. "You are making that noise again," frowned the goblins. "Please stop that, for it makes us feel unhappy." "Are you a witch? Is this some sort of magic?" "It makes you unhappy because we are friends," said the princess. "But we don't know you, and you are not like us. Sometimes friendship comes right away, even between people who are very different." "Does it mean we can't steal from you anymore?" "Yes, but that's what we do. We are the crafty goblins who live under your house." "Well then, maybe we could arrange something. Is that what friends do?" "Yes, I believe they do." And this is how the princess met the crafty goblins, and how they became friends. The Bear's Big Paws. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the old bear was out looking for a snack when he spied a bee's nest in a hole high up a tree. The tree was dry and brittle, but the old bear was hungry, and so he made his way to the nest. But when he had got there, he found his giant paw couldn't fit into the hole. Determined, he tried to force it inside, but the effort caused the branch below him to snap. The old bear tumbled to the ground and landed with a painful oomph. He lay there, stunned from the fall, when all of a sudden something bit him. The bite was followed by another, and another, and another. Carpenter ants were swarming up his legs. You see, they had been nesting in the branch, and they did not appreciate being forced from their home. The old bear howled and jumped to his feet. to dance around as he swatted and snapped. But his big old paws couldn't do much about the tiny ants. When he had finally managed to squish or scare them all off, the old bear heard someone laughing. The crafty goblins had seen the whole thing. Clumsy old bear, they teased. Those big old paws aren't good at anything, are they? Then they sped off, leaving old bear's pride hurting just as bad as his body. He lumbered through the forest, hungry and sad. Maybe I am just a clumsy old bear, he moaned, and my big old paws aren't good at anything. At that moment, the old bear heard a sad, sad noise. What's that? He wondered. And he followed the sound to where a mountain goat stood atop a boulder high up a hillside. Old bear, she cried. Old bear, please help. My kid is stuck. Sure enough, a tiny mountain goat was trapped inside the stones, bleeding sadly. The old bear began to walk toward them, and then stopped. I'm probably just going to make it worse, he thought. But then the goat kid started to bleat even louder, and the old bear put away his fear. He climbed up to where the goat was trapped, careful of where he stepped and trying not to think of how he had only just fallen out of the tree. Every now and then, the ground would slide away from under his feet, but he kept going. When he reached the goat kid, he put his mighty paws against one of the boulders and began to push. At first, it didn't budge, but he dug in and pushed even harder. Finally, the boulders parted just wide enough to let the kid scramble to safety. The old bear released the boulder and let out a roar of triumph. Thank you, gushed the mama goat, and she and her kid bounded off up the mountain. The old bear watched them go with a smile, and then made his way back down the hillside, wiggling his rump in triumph as he went. To his surprise, the crafty goblins waited at the bottom of the hill. We saw the whole thing, they said. We were wrong. You aren't just a clumsy old bear, and your paws are good for helping others. The old bear forgave the goblins for doubting him, because he had doubted himself just as much. He never again thought his paws weren't good at anything, even though sometimes they weren't always great at everything. And that was how the old bear proved that his heart was bigger than his paws. The moon hag loses her name. Once upon a time, in a deep and cold lake in an ancient forest, there lived an old seal who was a powerful witch in disguise. She was mean and cruel. She liked nothing more than to swim in the deepest part of the lake, where the light was dim under the ice, admiring the corpses of the many victims she tricked into the water over the years. She was so hateful that only the cold water of the lake could keep her cool. Her most prized possession was a tin mirror sold to her by the secret keeper, and she kept it in a chest at the bottom of the lake. It was no ordinary mirror. If you looked into it, you would see a reflection of who you truly desired to be, and for 1 hour the mirror granted you the power to appear as that person. Whenever a boat or an unwise traveler approached the edge of the lake, the old witch used the mirror to appear as the beautiful woman she always wished to be, and with this disguise she lured the unfortunate sailor or wanderer into the deep and cold water. There, this old seal forced the victim to become her servant, and when she was done with them, they joined her collection of corpses in the deepest part of the lake. One day, when the old seal swam down to her den under the lake, she discovered that someone had stole her mirror. The chest where she kept her most prized possession had been forced open, and now it was empty. Who would have committed such a crime? Who had dared to deprive her of her only treasure? The old seal went mad, and her anger heated the water of the lake around her. For a time, everyone was happy with the temperature change, for the weather suddenly became sweeter and the air warmer. But after a few weeks, things started to get ugly. First, the fish began to die off, for they could not live in the hot water. Then the glaciers began to melt, and the water of the lake rose and spilled out, flooding the forest and the meadows. And finally, the weather grew so hot that even the Ice King himself was awakened from his long sleep and decided to see what was going on. In the deepest part of the lake, he found the Mad Witch steaming among the corpses of her victims, so angry that the lake was about to boil. It only took a few minutes for the Ice King to understand what had happened and demand that the thieves present themselves before him. The thieves had no choice but to appear, for no one dared to disobey the Ice King. The crafty goblins presented themselves, mirror in hand. "Why did you steal the mirror?" asked the king. "We were curious. We just wanted to see what we really wanted to be," apologized the goblins. "But the stupid thing is broken. We looked the same. That does not mean it did not work," smiled the Ice King. "Now, apologize and give the mirror to me, for it is too powerful to be used by thieves or a mean old hag." The goblins apologized and gave the mirror to the Ice King, but the old seal was still angry. "And what about me?" she asked. "I have been deprived of my treasure, and I demand compensation." The Ice King frowned as he spoke again. "Old hag, you are mean and cruel, but I concede you have been wronged. For now, you will be allowed to leave the lake and walk the earth as the hag you really are, but only when the moon is full. And you, goblins, you had better stay away from the lake, for I won't protect you from the moon hag's wrath." And this is how the two goblins forced the moon hag to change her name. The goblins tricked the Mad Hunter. Once upon a time, in a castle just beyond the ancient and deep forest, the Mad Hunter was punished by the Gold Lady for failing to return with the wise princess. "For your failure," said the Gold Lady, "I will take your left hand. You will return to the ancient and deep forest and hunt the wise princess, and if you can bring her back, I will return your hand to you. Fail again, and I will take your right hand." The Mad Hunter could hunt with just his right hand, but if he lost both his hands, he would never be able to hunt again, and would no longer be a Mad Hunter, but only a madman. So, the Mad Hunter returned to the ancient and deep forest, searching with his piercing eye for the wise princess. Crafty goblins were out searching for mischief when they saw the Mad Hunter on the prowl. "We cannot let him find the princess," said the goblins, and so they devised a plan. It was a wash day, and the princess had hung her beautiful gown out to dry. They stole it from the line and stuffed it full of straw, and then returned to where the Mad Hunter was scouring the paths of the forest. As the Mad Hunter turned down a path that would have led him to the big wooden house, the goblins danced the straw princess in and out of view in the opposite direction. The ruse worked. The hunter fixed his piercing eye on them and followed. Through the day and into the night, they led him away from the true princess. As night fell, the crafty goblins realized the error in their plan. The Mad Hunter was now hunting them. If he caught them, he would not be kind. So, They put their heads together to come up with a plan. It did not take them long to realize where they should go. They led the Mad Hunter to the edge of the deep and icy lake, and when he came into view, they weighed the fake princess down with stones and dropped her into the frigid water, careful not to plunge into the depths themselves, lest the moon hag take her revenge on them. The Mad Hunter removed his clothing and dove in after the fake princess. He followed the shape of the sinking princess deep into the chilly water down below, where ice covered the lake's surface. Finally, he caught her, but when he spun her around, he realized she had no head and that her body was stuffed with straw. And then he felt a slippery fin brush his shoulder as the moon hag loomed overhead. The next morning, the princess went to retrieve her gown from the clothing line, and found that it was gone. She immediately suspected the goblins of mischief and called, "Goblins, did you take my gown?" The goblins emerged from their cave and nodded sadly. "Now what will I wear?" asked the princess, sad and angry that she had lost her only dress. "Let us explain," said the goblins. So they told the princess the story of the Mad Hunter, and then they produced his clothing, which was a bit large for the princess, but much warmer than her beautiful gown. She immediately forgave them. "Thank you, my friends," she said, "for rescuing me and for this clothing, which will keep me much warmer in the winter than my beautiful gown." The Mad Hunter was forced to remain below the lake with the moon hag, but she did not kill him, because he even reduced to just one hand. He was too useful a servant. Lo, he plotted the day he would emerge, to once again hunt the wise princess, earn back his left hand. And that is the story of how the crafty goblins rescued the wise princess from the Mad Hunter. The Pelican helps her friends. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, an early winter storm blanketed everything in the snow. It was so early in the year that the creatures of the forest were not yet ready for an ordinary winter, much less a bad one, and everyone agreed the storm was a sign the Ice King had plans for a long, cold winter. The princess had grown up in a kingdom where it was sunny all year long, and the goblins were very young, so no one in the big wooden house knew how to prepare for such a winter. The house was not well insulated, and they did not have enough fuel or food. Only the pious pelican noticed their plight, and when it came time to fly south with the other birds, her heart was heavy with sadness. "What can I do?" she thought. "I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock?" The time came to go, and the pelican struggled to take flight. It felt as though a leaden weight were stuck right in the center of her chest. "What can I do?" she thought. "I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock?" She managed to take off, but only just barely, flapping fiercely to catch up with the other birds. As the pious pelican began her journey, the storm picked up, battered her to and fro. She had fallen well behind the flock, and she was already growing tired. But for all her challenges in the air, she could tell things were much worse on the ground. A deep freeze had settled over the forest. The leaden weight on her chest, or in her chest, grew heavier as she thought of the princess and the goblins. "What can I do?" she thought. "I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock?" The storm intensified, and the pelican was in a total whiteout. She knew she should have despaired, but all she could feel was the weight. which had grown and grown until she thought she might drop out of the sky. She had felt called to help the princess and the goblins, but she had ignored it. I should have stayed, she thought. It was the right thing to do, and now I'm lost, with no way to make it right. Suddenly, she was plucked from the sky and deposited in the hall of the Ice King. Pelican, he said, you were flying in circles around my mountain. I was lost, she said, weighted down by the weight of guilt in my heart. The Ice King stared at her sagely. Is it guilt, or is it something else? Open your beak. He reached down inside of her, pulling out a glowing stone. The pious pelican was surprised at how it filled her with warmth, chasing away cold and her doubt. You know what you must do, said the Ice King. The pious pelican flew straight to the big wooden house. Snow had already blown in through its many cracks, and ice crept across the floorboards. She found the princess and the goblins huddled in front of the quiet hearth, nearly frozen solid. No, she cried, and then she placed the stone in the princess's lap. The warmth of it spread through the whole of the house, melting all that had frozen. The princess threw her arms around the pelican's chest, and the goblins clung to her legs. Thank you, they cried. You're welcome, said the pelican, smiling in deep satisfaction. What is that? Asked the princess, staring at the wonderful stone. At first, said the pelican, I thought it was my guilt, but when the Ice King pulled it out of me, I realized it was something much more powerful. Just then, the storm broke, and the skies cleared. The pelican filled the big wooden house's larder with food from her beak, and then she took to the skies, lightened by the knowledge that through her charity, everyone in the big wooden house would be warm and fed until spring. And that is the story of how the pious pelican saved the wise princess and the crafty goblins from the long winter. The goblins earned their voice. Once upon a time, in the deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblins spied on the secret keeper as she made her rounds, gathering up secrets that the animals of the forest had for sale. How, said the first goblin, does she get people's secrets? Do you suppose she peels open their heads? Let's find out, said the second, and so the goblins watched the secret keeper. They watched her until the stalwart moose came to her, head hanging low. It was my fault. I chose the uneven trail. I can't bear to remember. The secret keeper nodded and gazed into stalwart moose's eyes. Though the goblins couldn't hear anything, they knew she was speaking to the moose, for the secret keeper spoke in people's minds with the gift of the voice. After a few minutes, the stalwart moose blinked. I feel lighter, said Moose. Did I just give you something? The secret keeper nodded, handing him a coin. The stalwart moose nodded and plodded along down the trail. He spied the goblins hiding in the woods and narrowed his eyes, for he knew the goblins were often up to mischief. The two goblins whistled innocently, and the moose was forced to carry on, because they were not doing anything obviously bad. I need to know what the secret was, said one of the goblins. Let's go buy it. So the goblins approached the secret keeper before she could stow away Moose's secret. We want to buy Moose's secret. What do you have to trade? Asked the secret keeper, her voice filling their minds. The goblins produced a silver-handled hairbrush they had stolen from the princess, and the secret keeper nodded. And that is how the goblins came to know that Moose's mate had tumbled down a cliffside to her death. The secret keeper moved on. The first of the goblins said, "I want to know more." So the goblins followed the secret keeper, hoping to find where she hid the secrets. They followed her to the peak of a nearby ridge and watched as she stowed the rest of the day's secrets high in a cloud. When she had gone, they climbed a high spruce tree that disappeared into the misty sky. They reached out and just managed to dip their hands into the clouds. Their heads were filled with memories, and they snatched their hands back out, as if they had just thrust them in boiling water, tears pouring down their cheeks. That was how the secret keeper found them, crying in the tree. "You stole my secrets," seethed the secret keeper. "Give them back." Crafty goblins stopped crying because they saw an opportunity. "What will you give us in exchange?" they asked. "I will give you back the silver-handled hairbrush," offered the secret keeper. "For so many secrets? You'll have to offer more than that." "What if," said the secret keeper, "I shared the gift of voice?" The crafty goblins grew excited. "That will do." So the secret keeper shared the gift of voice with the goblins, and immediately they found that they could hear one another's thoughts and feel each other's feelings. The crafty goblins gave back the secrets they had taken and ran back to the big wooden house. There they found the princess preparing food. They tried to peer into her mind, but they found it was a blank. They tried to speak to her using only their own minds, but she could not hear them. It seemed the secret keeper was craftier than the crafty goblins, for she had only shared enough of her power to let the goblins use the gift of voice with each other, and not with the whole of the forest. And that is how the goblins stole the gift of voice from the secret keeper, but why they could only use it with each other. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, please hit the like button. If you'd like to see more content like this, please hit the bell in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Later, world.